us. What I'd love to do is actually ask you a different question as we start today, but you can always respond as you like. The normal question is like, hey, was there anything that really piqued your interest or made you bristle? But I think I want to ask, have you seen this play out in the last 2 weeks as we've been reading this book? Have you seen any of this play out in regular relationships? And if you don't like that question, you can answer any one you want or offer a different one for us.
So I'm sorry, my kids are probably going to start screaming in the background, but is it has it been an effective thing? Have I seen this being positive or just the opposite type of communication?
Either way, like, have you noticed yourself? Have you found yourself like, oh, I'm doing that thing, or like, hey, I'm doing that thing and I'm going to try making this little turn? Either one.
Yeah. Yesterday, we went to the beach with the boys and like, they were so excited and we were all excited. And then like, I don't know, 20 minutes before we leave, one of them decided that they didn't want to go and that they were not happy, completely just beside themselves about how unhappy and upset they were. So I still, it's like a new technique and I don't fully know how to use it. So I was just sort of trying to do the, like, you know, the behavior and the actions, because I read Observe Friday. And then last night I read the feelings. And so as I was reading the feelings, it recalled back this sort of exchange that was like an hour long, you know, like just so much. And I like, oh, wow. Okay. I had so many more feelings associated with that episode than I really was even aware of. Like, I think my main feeling was like mad. And I think I've heard like, you know, the main things that people can label are like mad, sad, and glad, you know? So I often go like, well, I was mad there, but I was like, oh, well, no, I was irritated. And then I was also like perplexed because I'm like, what happened, you know? And then I was concerned because I was like, well, like wrong, you know? So there's all these different emotions that I was sort of experiencing and unaware of it until after the fact. Like, I wish I had that list of emotions with me at all times so I could sort of run through and see, you know, what am I actually feeling? Because I think oftentimes I don't know, you know? Anyway, so that was my sort of positive and negative experience with the communication this week.
Thank you. If I can just offer, I felt like that's one of the things he really chased down in these chapters is we often don't know how we feel. And we often think we do. I feel judged. I feel that you are unreasonable, right? And like, you know, what he draws out, like those aren't feelings at all. And, you know, it's this interesting thing. I've been in a couple of groups and they always say like, hey, during the presentation, let's talk about the phenomenology, which really means like, what was happening in your body? And the answers are really like, people are like, oh, I felt fine. But like the answers are like, I noticed my pulse going up, or I could feel like my armpits start to sweat, or like my mouth got really dry when you said this thing. And we so rarely pay attention to that stuff. And our body's giving us cues all the time. And so like, you know, it's just interesting to try to think like, what was happening in your body when your kid said, I don't want to go. You know, like it's just, again, like something we're so not used to paying attention to, and our body's really trying to get our attention. Kathy?
Well, Mike, I also want to point out that another thing he talks about is that our language is so imprecise.
Yeah.
Is we mix everything all up the way we say this. So, and that's the way we've always talked about it and learned about it. So everything is all just confused and jumbled in there. And we have to, it's a whole process to learn how to separate it out. And the language doesn't make it easy.
Thank you.
The thing I figured out is that when I graduated from college, or about that time, I made a conscious decision that I would not want to have children. and I couldn't figure out why. And I think now I know why. I couldn't handle them.
I mean, truth be told, none of us knew what we were doing, you know? I think if we'd known what we were getting into, most of us might have like shared your decision, but, you know, good thing for like, you know, like blissful ignorance and like learning on the go, right?
In defense of, I want to say in defense of Tim, but Tim has been my daughter's father for
40 years.
For 40 years. And my girls were grown. They were in high school, college and high school when he came into our lives. And I will not complain. I have no reason to complain. We've had some bumpy rides, especially at the beginning, because he had no children and went into one was freshman in college and another one a senior in high school. So as you can well imagine, it was bumpy at the beginning, but they are best friends. Best friends. They turn to him. They'll call me, but Mom, would you ask Papa? They don't call him Tim. They call him Papa. Blah 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 blah. So that's just it's some of it is miraculous. It's like God just stepped in, I think, and said, "No, this is the right man for you," and that he's good for the girls, and he certainly has been, because we've been together a long time.
So I'm going to share that, and you might hear me say this in church a little bit, but I had like 3 conversations I was dreading in the past week because there was all some conflict involved, you know, and like I know better than to get worked up about that stuff, but I still do. Like I lose sleep over that. I'm just like really conflict averse, and because I often think like, oh, like you're attacking me. And this is like how I evaluate some of these conversations, you know, and like I had this very strange gift, and I don't know if it was like the gift of the Holy Spirit or if it was because I'd read this book. Like I don't know what to call it, but like in each one of these conversations that I had that I didn't want to have, it was when people started to share, I had this like remarkable piece, like, oh, you're telling me your experience. And I even found myself thinking like, factually, that's incorrect. Like I know the facts and that's not it. And somehow I was like delivered from saying that. I was able to think like, oh, that's how you experienced that. And like I experienced that different. And this is going to sound really dumb, but like normally I love getting evaluative in those moments and saying like, well, you said that thing and that isn't how that worked out. And somehow I just didn't do that. And I kid you not, I left every one of these 3 conversations like so alive and connected to the other person that I didn't even know how to express that. So this played out for me in a really, really good way this week. And I almost didn't even know how to share it. I was talking to somebody who I deeply love and trust about one of these. And I realized when I was doing that, like I felt it coming. Okay, now I'm going to evaluate this conversation. What I felt was this person who I know and trust evaluating the details instead of connecting to the person. And I almost wanted to stop sharing, or I wanted to say like, listen, like don't focus on the details, focus on the connection, because that's like where the life is. And of course, again, that was me just being evaluative, but I had quite a week with this. I did. I had quite a week. And like one of these relationships is with somebody who like doesn't tend to share much. And I realize it's probably because I like stop them, and I tend to stop them and like pay attention to the facts instead of like make space for them to tell me their experience. And I will describe that I did not really do that. And as a result, I got more sharing out of this person than I've ever had out of this person. And instead of leaving like, oh, they're all wrong, again, like I just felt so incredibly connected to them that it was like, I mean, it was just a miracle. It was like I had a week of miracles. That's what I want to say. Morning, Rhonda. Good to see you.
Sorry, it took me so long that my email got lost.
You're good. How did you all do? Let me ask you, when he asked us at the end of these chapters, he gave us sentences, right? Like circle the ones that are evaluative or not. How was that for you?
It's good.
Antha? Yeah, please.
So I want to say that I just loved his way of phrasing his version of the answers, that instead of, well, that's right or that's wrong, which is what you normally get on this kind of quiz, it was, we are in agreement or we don't agree. And I really thought that was a new for me way of thinking about answering this kind of question. I really liked it.
Thank you. I also was struck by we're in agreement over not in agreement. Yeah. Jen or Mike, I see you're ready.
Go ahead. Just kind of, I'm a little late coming back on the last thing, but one of the things we did this week,
It felt like a
feels
year.
like a year, was Jen printed out the words. And so they've been on the counter and we've been having a lot of fun trying to figure out the feelings, or, sometimes just making fun of the feelings, but that's been really a good time and added a whole bunch of joy to what we did. And we're pretty good about on the exercises about picking the right thing. It's great to see it in print. It's a little harder to do it in person.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
Sorry.
I was just going to add, one of the things that we did when he would give a scenario where, the young man couldn't figure out how to put it into words, we tried to figure out how would we do it, and use that as a practice exercise. But I'm gonna admit, when we saw that we were in agreement with the answer choices, we moved on. So I'm gonna have to go reread his responses, because if we were right, we were like, sweet, we're right. And we kept going. So I need to go back and reread the answers. So that was a good point to bring up. Thanks.
Kathy, please.
I just wanted to add to that I was probably correct 95% of the time, or I was in agreement.
You were in agreement.
95%. But then I started thinking that, it's one thing to be reading the exercises in a book and follow along after we've just done it. And this is like taking tests, and I usually do a good job on tests, but it's a totally different thing if you're having an actual conversation with someone or trying to figure out what to say, because I'm a very non-confrontational person. And if things, and one of my friends said, well, Kathy, things that you think are confrontation, we don't consider that a confrontation. So I'm probably more sensitive than other people to that kind of thing, would just be my perception of that. And I kind of back off and I can't think of what to say. I freeze. And then 3 days later, I should have said.
Yeah.
And I stew over this stuff for a long time. And I thought, holy moly, it's going to take me forever to learn this technique. So for what that's worth, maybe other people are struggling too.
Well, Father Mike, thank you for sharing your stories from this week, your experiences of those confrontations. How do you feel you were able to approach them? What helped you? You mentioned, of course, the Holy Spirit, it's the gift of the Holy Spirit, but can you tell us more about how you were able to prepare yourself, for your approach this week?
Boy, thanks, Adele. I did not prepare myself by fasting and praying. And I thought maybe I should have done that. Like, I think I just tried to go in saying, like, I don't know what this is going to be, and I'm just going to try to leave some room. And I think the other container I tried to make is, look, you really can hear their experience and just leave it at that. Like, you don't need to edit their experience. And like, it's okay if you chase it down. This is like really what he suggests, right? Is instead of stopping with like, you're wrong and you can't do that, it's like, what's underneath that thing that you're saying? And I know that I'm just going to out myself as a parent. I often find myself feeling disrespected, feeling ignored, and I guarantee you that is not what my kids have in mind at all. They're not like, how can I disrespect my dad right now? And so like making room that may not be their experience, it really allows me to like try to ferret out, well, I wonder what their experience is. And instead of like going to like a presupposition to make room for some curiosity, is like, that's maybe been the helpful trade. Like, can I be curious about this? And I think what's interesting at the end of the day, like, honestly, I still have like most of the power in that relationship, and the question is like, do I want to teach my kids that when you have power, you just get to use it, right? Like, because I'm bigger or older, or I have the money or the car, you better do what I want. Or do I want to teach like, hey, like, where are you in this? Here's where I am in that. And here's kind of what I'm willing to do, which is a really different way of nuancing the conversation. And he doesn't say this, but there's a follow-up book he ends up recommending, that a lot of times we go straight to punishment because it's convenient. Like, we know, like, it's just easy. Whether with our kids or with people we work on, it's just, like, there's just not ambiguity. And then like, we know how to move on. But the tough bit, right, is that so often we can move past these real opportunities, connect. Even with our little kids, right? Because like Julia said, like, most of us, like, sadly, we've got like a 3 feeling vocabulary. I'm happy, I'm sad, I'm mad. And I get like, hey, that's a helpful start, but like, English has 540,000 words. And to put that in context, German has 220, right? So like the lexicon of English is like pretty much one of the biggest lexicons of any language in the world. And you know why we do that? Because we pull loan words in, right? Like that word ennui in French, like that's an English word now. And we used it because it like nuances a feeling, right? So we have all these words. We just normally like don't actually use them. We go to the evaluative words. And I do feel, I'm going to say, I feel a little bit like frustrated that I have to learn how to talk. Because I didn't learn how to, I'm just going to say, I did not learn how to talk. I'm not blaming anybody. I didn't come away from childhood or youthhood or even seminary. And I still find myself in times of conflict wanting to armor up by making an evaluation. This is what Brene Brown says, right? Like when we start to like put our defenses up, really all that is evaluative. And it comes from us like feeling afraid and not being willing to admit that. The examples he gives, right, are these really interesting things where like, you can say like, I'm feeling really uncomfortable right now. And I don't, even when people don't respond to that really well, because he'll go on to say a couple of examples later in the book where like people are like, oh, like you poor thing, you're just feeling uncomfortable. He'll chase that. So it sounds like you're, or I'm hearing a lot of like need to control like perceived weakness. Like I'm hearing that's really important to you. Which I like, in my head, I'm like, oh, that can all be so like granola hippie stuff. But again, like I've seen it play out in some really fantastic ways. And like, I don't want my kid to grow up with a 3-word vocabulary. Like I don't want that for her and from her, or from him and for him, like, because things are more complicated than that. So maybe adult, like, I think the thing has just been like creating a frame that like, it doesn't just have to be one way. And that this is going to sound really kooky, right? But like connecting underneath the feeling is probably the most important thing that I'm being offered.
Yeah. And there's one thing in all of this, it's in conflict resolution management generally, but there's one thing that you have to look for, because there's one knockout for this, and that is if you see signs of contempt. And it gets right back to what you said. So this is about making connection between people. If one of the people doesn't value the other person as a human being, there's a sneer that people have when they have contempt for another person.
Yeah.
You see that, you should stop and walk away. It's not going to be good for everyone. And this is something I know from, not just from reading about it, but I did a mediation that I shouldn't have done, where there was contempt for one of the people for the other two. And we got into, I had been warned not to do it. But people who wanted to make peace, the couple wanted to make peace with the older gentleman, and wanted this badly. And so we started into this, and they just got more hurt. And we walked out about 20 minutes later, but it was 20 minutes too late. So there is a knockout. If one person doesn't value the other person as a human being, you got to stop. But that's the negative that proves your positive you were just talking about, that this is about connection between people, and they need to see each other as people.
You know, thanks, Mike. And I don't know if any of you know who John Gottman is. He's like a marital researcher, and he's like somehow able to predict a divorce like 95% of the time if the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse show up. And if you don't know this, I'll just give it to you really fast. The 4 horsemen of the apocalypse in a marital relationship are criticism, defensiveness, contempt, and stonewalling. And if those 4 show up, that marriage 95% of the time is over, whether it's through a divorce or just parallel living. And it's interesting because like this is really what this is kind of what we've been talking about, right? Defensiveness, contempt, criticism, also known as evaluation, and stonewalling, which is just the silent treatment, right? And thinking through, I don't think that's just about marriage. I mean, obviously it's really important in a marriage, but those horsemen show up in relationships with my kids, with other clergy. And look, I don't want to be married to them. I don't, but they're a good sign. Like, oh my God, like I'm feeling contempt. This is a chance I can make a turn. Instead of like that other person is a loser, contempt is like a signal, like you can make that turn. Julia, please.
So I kind of want to go to back thing Kathy talked about, but sort of, I think it's all related. But so I too shut down in conflict, and my brain is just like, like do no harm, nobody needs to get hurt, let's back away and get away from this situation. And so I'm really like much worse at being able to like identify other people's feelings, I guess, during those situations, other than like mostly I don't want you to be mad at me kind of thing. That's so I'm like, let me do whatever I can to sort of manage the situation. Whereas when I guess this isn't that novel, but where if it's just like I really well with somebody and I can like understand, I can read their feelings and emotions better. And so how do you get better at that in those moments of, where your brain is sort of in that like flight or, mode of how do you get better at that? I'm not really sure.
Yeah, and I'm not an expert, but I'll share personally that sometimes my wife will give me strong feedback of her experience of me. And what I want to do is go right to defense instead of saying like, she's telling me the quality of her experience. And that's really good to know. And actually, like with my wife, what I've realized, and this is the person I spend lots of time with, right? We talk every day, which is different from most relationships I'm in, right? Is that I can hear it as a criticism and a defense or a judgment, or I can say, aha, this person trusts me so much that they're willing to share their inner experience. And part of that trust is not just that I'll hear it, but they think we can come around on this. And so I think like part of it is when people share a criticism, they believe we can fix it instead of they're putting me down. And of course, neither thing is, we don't even know which one it is. So we might as well pick the better one. Because our life will be better if we pick the better one. Like they're choosing to trust me with their feelings. They're choosing to trust me because they think I can do something about it, or because they think like I'm a safe space to listen. And just that little internal turn makes a huge difference. Of course, your children trust you can do something about it. Of course they do, right? And having raised a teen, right? Part of like some of the shutdown I experienced was because I came at it as a fixer or a defender instead of I want to hear more about that experience. Again, I just think that's this interior turn. It's just a really small one. Like this person is telling me because they think I can do something about it, or this person's telling me the inner quality of their experience because they trust me. If I could approach every one conflict that way, I guarantee you it would reframe how I experience it. So Adele, I think that's part of it too, is like, how do we get ready for the conversation? We say like, hey, if something comes out, it's because they trust me. My hardest one on the list is stonewalling. Right? Like if I say hello to somebody and they don't say hi back, my brain goes like, pow! Even if I don't know them. I walk this neighborhood every day. I mean, every day. And there's people I say hello to and they stonewall me. And I find myself like having an existential crisis. I mean, I find myself like hating those people. Like I say hello to you, you could just wave back, you know? And it's like funny, I start to like, when my head's working, I'm like, well, why are you even saying hello anyway? Are you trying to test whether they're going to greet you back, or like are you actually trying to say hello to them? And like, why do they need to do something back? I mean, this is still though a trigger for me, right? If I say something and I feel like you've ignored me, a lot of times I'll say something to my daughter and I'll get super mad because she'll just do her thing. And then she'll say like, I didn't hear you. And then I want to say like, of course you heard me, how dare you, know, and like, oh, maybe she didn't, you know, like, again, I don't know, parents, I don't know your experience, but if my kids ignore me, I lose my, I mean, I would rather they said like, I hate you. I would rather get that than the stonewall.
What's the value behind the emotions? What's the value that's driving you?
Yeah, it's really clear. I want to be heard. Like, I want to be seen. And for somebody to like pick up the auditory and not respond makes to me it like, I shouldn't say it makes me feel. Usually what happens is I map that into this place of like unworthiness or like contempt. And I guarantee you that's not what they're thinking. That's just how I map that. So they don't make me feel that way. I interpret that stimulus in this way of like derision or disrespect, when quite honestly, they might just be in the zone, you know?
So you value like belonging to the group? Is that the?
Yeah, I really value response. And this is one of those things that we've talked about. Like I mentioned this and I try not to like kill myself on this. I'll tell you how I've done this, but like, when people email me, I want to email them back, because when I email somebody and I don't hear back, the story my brain normally makes up is they've read my email and they've chosen I'm not worth their time. Instead of, hey, it went to their spam box, or they've got 1,000 other emails, right? And so like, instead of being on like the hustle train, like I got to email everything immediately, I've actually chosen based on this stuff to turn my notifications off on my phone. So, you know, and all that means, right, is I'll get the little mail icon and then I'll be like, oh, there's an email, I should check that. And like this week, when I had one of those 3 conversations, like I lost sleep over it because somebody sent me an email at 9 o'clock. I got the notification. I looked at it right before bed and I was just like full of anxiety. I didn't need to do that. I could have answered that email the next day. So actually, I think some of it is like, it's not like a burden. It's like, hey, because of this stuff, like there's strategies I can take to like help me actually be connected. And one of my strategies is I've turned off my notifications, and I'm also trying to not answer so much emails on Fridays and Saturdays. So if you ever email me and you don't hear back, that's because I'm doing that on purpose. I even thought about putting in my signature line, I answer emails Monday through Thursdays.
Well, and I had to start doing that. I have over 900 students this semester. And so my email does tell them when I will reply, because I figure it takes away some of the anxiety on their end.
Yeah.
So that they're not wondering, well, why is she ignoring me? How come she hasn't answered my email? So I feel you on that one. And I also relate to the running everything through your head 20 times on why they didn't respond to you the way you wanted them to or expected them to. And I find myself having to say stop, because I'm never going to know why. I don't think like that human does.
Yeah.
But we value connection, and we didn't make contact with that person. So it feels like a missed opportunity.
Yeah, you know, the phrase Brene Brown uses, and I actually had one of my dreaded meetings, this phrase came out, and not from me, is the story I'm making up in my head. And this is where you say, like, look, this happened and this happened, and the story I'm making up in my head is that this was not important to you. And Brene Brown says, like, it's really great if you tell that, because then you can edit it. Like you can say, here's the story I've made up. How shall I edit it according to you? And it sounds funny, but it's just this great opportunity to like get that out and correct it. And you don't always have to tell it. Like she says, you can write it down. And Anne Lamott calls it an SFD, which stands for shitty first draft, although Brene Brown calls it stormy first draft. And it's basically like, here's the stimulus and here's the meaning I've made out of it. And there's other meanings possible. And this other bit that I've read just this week, because I'm doing this training called Dare to Lead. It's one of Brene Brown's, it's her most recent book. She talks about like this quality of leadership that says clear is kind. And I don't usually think that. I usually think clear is evaluative, and it's really good. It really dovetails with this. Like instead of saying, well, you never pick up your room, I've looked in the room 3 times this week, and it appears to be in the same sort of disarray. And like, I guess you could say that begrudgingly, but it's also very clear the experience that I've had, or the observation that I've made. So instead of saying you're messy, I can say the room's been in disarray each time I've looked in this week. Actually, I think that should really appeal to the engineers on the screen, because it's very data-driven, you know? Like, this is all scientific method stuff. But what's funny is, like, we'll do that at work, but we won't do that with relationships, when really, like, that's the difference. And I, you know, like, I've made this turn a couple of years ago. People say, like, politician Q is a liar. And it's been really important for me to say, like, I don't think that's the case. I don't know anybody who lies every time they open their mouth. I don't know anybody. So I could say, statement Q, statement Q was not supported by consequence F. And I realize, you know, that takes a lot of the vitriol out of the way I tend to describe people. Because again, like a liar is like not a human being anymore.
Oh, cool.
Julia, please. And then Julia, and then I saw Antha.
I don't know if my internet it keeps telling me my connection is bad. So I'm sorry. Tell me if you can.
No, we can.
I was
It's a
just gonna
little
say,
spotty, but it's okay.
Does anyone else have struggle with not just observing? No, like it's so hard not to observe and also make an assessment. And I don't know if my job lends to that, because like people tell me all of their symptoms and I'm supposed to like same time observe and assess and come up with a diagnosis and solve their problem for them. So I don't know. It's really hard for me to just observe, like so hard.
It's interesting, right, that he quotes that the Indian sage that says, like, the pinnacle of humanity is to the highest form of human intelligence is to observe without evaluating. I really want to evaluate that phrase.
There's part of the exercises, or one of the things where you're talking about just separating them into two sentences, the observation and the evaluation. And the critical part of my head says, yeah, okay, but which one is the person going to hear? They're going to hear the critique.
Yeah. Antha, I think you were up.
So I want to talk about vocabulary of feelings that I don't know if other people have this, but I've noticed my vocabulary for positive feelings is a lot weaker than the vocabulary for negative feelings. I've been keeping a journal through COVID, partly as a way to kind of help process how I'm feeling about stuff. And good is like my only positive word, whereas I've got irritated and frustrated and overwhelmed. I've got this like long list of words for the bad stuff that I can use fluently. But and I'm a writer as a side thing, and so I've got something here to improve my journaling and my own understanding of how I feel about what's going on.
Yeah.
Well, if I can add, Antha, because I'm the same way, and I think a lot of us just have jobs that are designed to find the fault. We know all of this is good, so we don't need to comment on the good. We just need to find this one little piece that needs to be tweaked to fix. And so be kind to yourself, because I do that too. And I find that with a relationship, that's not what the relationship wants or needs, but then maybe here all the silence means all of this is good. And I'm tweaking this one little thing. But I do that too. I'm very, very critical, but that's my life. And when you write a proof, you're not looking for all of the cases. You're looking for one spot that proves it wrong. So I can very much relate to that, but be nice to yourself. But I will say that this piece of paper even supports what you're saying, because the top part is the good, and look at the bottom part.
Yeah, that is the way with my job too. And I write fiction, and I've critiqued fiction for other people. And one of the people I was reading for came back to me and said, look, you've got to tell me some of the stuff I'm doing right too, that you so I learned to, when I critique, to like start with, okay, here's a couple of pages as well, the things I like, okay, now here are the things that I think you can work on.
Yeah. This other book that I've mentioned, he recommends down the road, it's called Punished by Reward. And it talks about how much we evaluate, for example, our kids, and how that can turn off their creativity really fast. Like, your picture is really good instead of, like, you've chosen to use some really diverse colors. And I know it's like, oh, like nobody wants that description. Like we want to give our kids praise, but like at the end of the day, praise is all about us being in control, not about what they produce. Like that thing was pleasing to me, as if that's why they were supposed to do it. Like it's, and again, like I'm sort of like, I don't even know how to talk to my kids anymore, because like I grew up on like a vocabulary of praise instead of a vocabulary of observation. And, like one of the things Brene Brown uses, and I think I mentioned to you, she's coming out with a book in November that's the Alphabet of Feelings. It's really like meant to increase our feeling vocabulary. And it's really just a discussion of like 60 feelings so that we can up our our vocabulary game. But like one of the things she talks about is seen, being seen. And that does not show up in the list of how we feel when our needs are being met. But I actually really appreciate it. It's like one of my favorite words for when my needs are met, is that somebody saw me for myself. And I've said this in church before, but like one of the people who I know is I perceive to be very skilled at this is Rob Puckett. I don't know if you know Rob, but I've actually never heard Rob make a joke at someone's expense. And one day after church, I had told this story where a parent like chased me because I had a tattoo and they said I was a bad priest. And somebody in the line said, well, I don't care that you have that at all. And Rob came up and said, I do care that you have that because it means something to you. And I thought like, okay, those are the steps. The steps are, I don't see that. And then the next step is, I see it and it means something to you. And maybe one day I'd like to hear it so I can even appreciate you more. Is Sam raising his foot to share? Hey, Sam, good to see you.
We just thought Julia was really flexible.
That would be amazingly flexible. Yeah. I appreciate Mike and Jen showing me that you've got that list and like you're going through that. I think I mentioned to you that list came to me from a clergy friend who's made like a fan deck of cards. You know, when I was studying for the GRE way forever ago, and we were doing like the analogy section, I made cards for all these words like bedizen and curmudgeon and fop. You know, if I was any somewhat shaky on it, I made a card. And I did great on that GRE, which is funny. Like I did this exercise to help myself on a test that was really evaluative and based on my ability to regurgitate vocabulary. So the question is like, will I put that same discipline in to a way of speaking that will improve my life and the life of others around me? And I'm reticent. I'm reticent to grow my vocabulary because there's no test. I don't know if you feel that. At all, but I'm like, you know, okay, that's nice, but I don't know if I want to invest in it, like by making, you know, flashcards. But I think it's really cool that my fellow cleric has made flashcards.
Yeah, I think what we're trying to do is trying to use this in our relationship to make that better. I mean, this isn't really new for me, but I've always used it in a controlled way. I knew I was going into a hard situation and therefore I prepared ahead of time and blah, blah, blah. And that's one thing, and that's great. But to try to use it every day with somebody who's like you're having conflicts with is hard. So I appreciate what you're saying because you did it for the test. And I think that's what I've done before. I've done it for the test.
Yeah.
This is to do this with Jen, just to show Jen that I value our relationship and trying to make it more just. And we had a discussion about values yesterday and values that I have from my background, from the congregation I grew up in are community, justice, and peace. And you know that drives a lot of the things that I want. And so how does that work with us? And so it's been really interesting to do this and try to do it daily. Mm-hmm. And it's really hard, I think.
Interesting, yeah, I was gonna say interesting is a synonym here for challenging probably. But we're gonna design an app that it just has a spinner. And then it's gonna pick one of these words, and then that'll be the word that we use. So we're gonna.
I feel dubious.
Yes, yes. Okay, fine. Dubious is the word of the day.
There, you can make a random choice generator and just load it up with choices and then have it pick.
Then I could try to feel like that. That'd be great.
Yeah,
Oh, they could just have the good words on your spinner.
there you go. I like it.
I'll spin for you.
I'm gonna spin for you.
I think I might have mentioned, and maybe in a different forum, that one of my preferred family therapists that we saw a long, long time ago actually took a lot of issue with the word anger. And he said, like, anger is like a dumping ground that we use. It's just like catch-all for like energy we don't know where to put. So he had like 99 substitutes for anger, like frustrated, disappointed, you know, and like I actually thought there was a lot to that. And maybe like the quick move is like, I'm feeling angry, and that anger is really a result of frustration or, you know, like feeling vexed or whatever word that is. But like it had an emoji poster. I don't know if you have to be like a therapist to get this special poster. I have looked before and not been able to find it. Like the instead of anger, I'm feeling blank poster. But I do realize, you know, again, we have all these words in English, and I want my daughter to be able to use them. And I also would like to be able to use them. I told you last week that I'm choosing to feel angry about State Bill 8. I am choosing to do that, but I'm trying to move past that choice of anger. I do feel very, very frustrated about it. Maybe that's where I am. I'm at frustration. I'm at disappointment. And I think those are much more helpful ways to talk about it, because when I say I'm mad, it's like, well, who cares? You're mad about everything. But to be able to say, like, I'm finding this really disappointing and frustrating, it really opens the door for people to say, like, huh, what are you frustrated about? Usually when somebody says they're angry, I don't want to follow up. It's like, oh, okay, you're just mad, you know, but like, you're disappointed. Whoa, that's a weird reaction. Like, why are you disappointed about this state bill? I don't know. It's like sometimes using these words invites connection. Sometimes I feel like I'll put my feelings out there and people don't respond, but it's probably because I didn't put them out in a way that really invites a response. I'm feeling really bad today. Oh, okay, I got bad days too. You know, you're like, you know, it's like in some ways that's just like okay, that's a data point instead of an invitation, like for a conversation to show up.
Do you think that the way you're feeling about State Bill 8 is you're feeling that a bunch of people have been totally disregarded?
That's a good question. That's probably an evaluation, not a feeling, if I'm going to be in agreement with Rabbi Rosenberg here. I think it's probably more that I feel, I probably feel very fearful about what could happen to my wife and daughter and people like them. I have that fear. I think probably I'm also feeling perplexed at the remedies that this bill is imposing for what people identify at the problem. I do think I feel, yeah, Tim, I think trying to think how I can say what you're saying in the feeling. I think I probably do feel disheartened that, at least in my own information, that these are, it seems like the folks who have crafted this bill tend to be men. But this is a bill that most directly affects women. So I feel a little disheartened that that maybe there weren't more opinions from the people it directly affects. I think I'm also feeling sensitive to those people, because I can think of a lot of, like, easily I can think of a lot of hypothetical situations where this would be really, 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 really tough for people. I'm feeling surprised because I was hopeful we were going forward. And in many ways, I feel like shocked I feel shocked that this bill represents, in my at least my evaluation, a really like hard U-turn in a lot of ways. And I'm feeling furious that it seems to be very controlling. Yeah.
Well, I feel extremely shocked that there wasn't, that there weren't more people involved in the process. And the paper had a very interesting little cartoon where Governor Abbott refuses to approve masks, but yet he's going to ban abortion, which seems like complete opposites. You're going to, so I don't know. It's something that is shocked, surprised, but it just, I don't know.
I appreciate it. And Tim, I have to be honest about like this particular bill, and in some relationships with my family, I often don't care to learn what the other people are thinking. And I probably need to do something about that within myself.
I don't understand what they're thinking. I don't know. Frustrated is probably not the best word, but it's just anger and feeling and just. But I also feel the same way about the gun law.
Yeah,
people can just walk around with guns all the time.
So I do want to take a moment and tell you that an attorney in our community is going to be offering a legal ethical analysis of State Bill 8. And this is going to be 2 weeks from tomorrow. And it's really going to be a description of what the bill really contains and how it will probably play out or could play out. And this will be very, very objective. That's the goal, is just so you can understand it. I'm going to do an evaluation right now and say this bill is much worse than you think it is. That's likely what you will learn. But that will be tomorrow, and it really matters because that attorney happens to be my life partner. So she will be doing this on behalf of our community and other communities, just so that really the goal is so that you can learn about it.
What time is that going to be, Mike? You said the Monday, but what time?
It's Monday the 27th from 6 to 7 p.m. It'll be 1 hour. There'll be no opportunity for conversation. All of the questions will be curated through chat. And that's mainly because as an attorney, people can sadly use her presentation against her in some really ugly ways. So we're not going to do that. But opportunities for questions are going to be there. Again, just to really understand this law, and also to think well, what do you do? What do you do with this or any law that that challenges your values? How do you want to, if you're in favor of this law, how do you show support for it? So hopefully that's helpful as an opportunity. I've been working on it with this person at home, so I see the value in it, but that it may not be valuable for you at this time. Okay, I'm looking at the time, and I'm super grateful for your showing up. Kathy, are you waving goodbye? Okay, thank you all for your time. Next week, we'll read 2 more chapters. We'll read 5 and 6. And I would ask that you consider, in preparation for next week, not just the material, the ways you see it playing out in your relationships at home and work. It's a lot to ask for folks to be vulnerable, but you don't have to name names, but it's always great to hear yeah, this is how it's playing out for me. Really grateful for your time and your thought, and I'll see you next week, if not before.